As they make their way out, just want you to ponder and think about this question for a moment. If you could change some things about your life for the purpose of making it less stressful, less depressing, more fulfilling, more joyful, what are some things you might change? Maybe you'd go somewhere where it doesn't snow in the middle of March, okay? You'd have a house on the beach somewhere, and that would make things better. Maybe you're thinking to yourself, someday when I reach the point where I can retire and stay home and I don't have to go to work 40, 50 hours a week, then everything will be better and I'll be at peace and I'll be happy and content. Maybe you're thinking if my husband would go back to work instead of being home all the time, then I'd be happier and more content. Maybe you're thinking someday when my kids grow up and get out of the house and it's not chaos all the time. Whatever your thing is, what are the things you would change and my life would be more peaceful, more joyful, better if I could change these circumstances? And almost all of us have a list of things we wish were different. A list of circumstances we would change if we could. We're going to be reading from Philippians chapter 4 today. And I want you to know that Paul has a very different take on happiness and peace and contentment. And what we're going to read today is that it's not about changing circumstances. It's not about making everything perfect. It's not about the beach house or the retirement plan or sending the kids to boarding school, though those might sometimes sound like a good idea. Rather, it's about your perspective within the circumstances you've been given. That joy and peace are available regardless of the circumstances in which you find yourself. So we're going to pick up reading Philippians chapter 4. We're going to start reading together in verse 4. Paul writes this. He says, "Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Let your graciousness be known to everyone, for the Lord is near." You hear that and you think, well, Paul, that must be easy for Paul to say. He probably had a good life, right? He's living the high life right now. Things are going well for him. You know, he's got chosen apostle. The churches love him. If you think that, you obviously don't know Paul's life story, okay? This is a guy who'd been stoned to death twice. Okay, stoned to death twice. And he's still writing a letter. This is a guy who's writing this letter not from a penthouse, not from a beach vacation home, but from prison. Okay, Paul has reached the end of his life by the time he writes Philippians. In less than a year, he's going to write 2 Timothy, where he says, I'm being poured out like a drink offering. I have finished the race. I have fought the good fight. Paul is coming to the end. He's awaiting trial. He's going to go from prison to sitting in front of Caesar, where he's going to defend himself, and he's going to be killed for what he has preached. And that's the guy who says, rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say, rejoice. How does someone sit in a jail cell knowing their death is just around the corner and write those words? Well, the answer was tucked there in verse 5. For the Lord is near. It's one of the central themes of the Bible. We've talked about it at length over the years together. The presence and nearness of our God. Whether it's Moses who can go and face Pharaoh because God says, I will go with you. Whether it's Joshua who can walk into the promised land and be bold and courageous, for the Lord your God will go with you wherever you go. Whether it's David who finds himself in the valley of the shadow of death and says, even here I will fear no evil, for my good shepherd, he is with me. His rod and his staff, they comfort me. It's Jesus giving the Great Commission, telling the disciples, go and preach the gospel, and people are going to reject you and persecute you and hate you, but you can do this because I will be with you always until the end of the age. And here's Paul in prison, surrounded by his enemies, his ministry essentially over, awaiting trial and execution, saying, rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I will say it just in case you missed it the first time. Rejoice, for the Lord is near. But whatever trial you're walking through, whatever situation you wish you could change, whatever circumstances you don't like, God is with you in those circumstances. The creator of the universe is with you. He holds you in his hand. He calls you his beloved. He is taking care of you. He's watching over you. What more reason do you need to rejoice than that you live and walk and breathe in the presence of the Almighty? Rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. Let all people everywhere know your graciousness, for the Lord is near. But he actually takes it one step further. He doesn't settle for just being joyful. He adds this command afterwards. He says, don't worry about anything. We're going to keep reading, but I want to pause there for a moment. Worry is the great enemy of joy. Anxiousness is the great enemy of rejoicing. Have you ever been in a situation where you should be happy? Like you're hanging out with your family at Christmas and you're opening presents and everybody's happy and we're eating food, and instead of enjoying the moment, all you can think about is all the work you have to do when you go back on Monday. And so you're sitting there in a situation where you should be joyful, and instead you're grumpy because you're anxious about what is yet to come. Have you ever been in that spot where you're in a moment where everything is good? It's a really good day, and all you can think about is what's going to happen next week or next month or whenever. And so you just can't even enjoy the moment. And the reason Paul pairs these verses together is because worry and anxiousness is the enemy of joy. You cannot be joyful and anxious at the same time. They're opposed to one another. And so Paul says, don't worry about anything. We thought last week's command was hard, right? Do nothing from selfish ambition or vain conceit. Try this one. Do not worry about anything, but in everything through prayer and petition with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. What is it that you worry about? What is it that you're anxious about on a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month kind of basis? What makes you worry? Now, psychology today tells us that most of our worries can be lumped into three categories. Category number one, we worry about finances, right? And that takes different forms and different shapes. For some of you, that's worried about job security. It's worried about whether or not you're going to have enough to retire, when you're going to be able to retire. For some of you, it's about bills. I just had this big medical thing, and my insurance didn't cover as much as I thought they would, and I don't know that I'm going to be able to pay all of the bills. And for some of you, it's looking at the economy and the global picture and going, I don't know, I'm too old to ride my bike around everywhere. I don't know what I'm going to do. Can't afford gas anymore. But we worry about finances and paying bills and making sure we have enough and making sure things are being taken care of. And it keeps some of us up at night. Some of us, we worry about relationships. We worry about whether or not our friends really like us. What do they say about us when we're not around? Was that joke I told really funny, or did they find it offensive and just laugh so I'd stop talking? You ever have that? Maybe that's just me. We worry about our parents and how they're going to take care of themselves as they get older. We worry about our kids and whether or not we screwed them up beyond repair. We worry about our spouse and whether or not we're giving them what they need. We worry about people and the relationships we have with them and whether or not we'll fit into that new group and whether or not people will like us and who will be there to take care of me. We worry about these relationships. And we worry about health. We worry about those test results that are going to be back in 2 weeks. And we worry about that surgery that was supposed to take 2 hours, but she's still back there 6 hours later, and I wonder what's going on, what's taking so long. We worry about the appointment that we can't get. We worry about why our arm hurts or why we've had a headache for a week or why our back hurts. The answer, you're getting older. That's what happens. But we worry about our health. And we could add other things to the list. But Paul says, worry about nothing. Don't worry about anything. And he says the solution to that, the fix for that, is to stop worrying and start praying. And he uses two words there. He says, with petition and thanksgiving. To petition means to come with your request. To come before God and go, God, this is what I need. I've got bills due and I don't know how I'm going to pay them. God, I've got no friends, and I wish somebody in my life actually cared about me for me. God, I don't know what's going to happen when these test results come back. I don't know how I'm going to fix this. And it come to God with petition. God, this is what I need. And here's the reason that's so important, and here's the reason why it fixes anxiety. Because here's what anxiety and worry are. There's almost always two things about anxiety and worry. Number one, they're future focused. They're about things that have not yet happened. Many a scholar have used the phrase, they bring tomorrow's concerns into today, right? I don't know what's going to happen when those test results come back next week. In fact, if you've ever been through that process with someone, it's almost better to have the worst news there is to have, but to know, than that 4 or 5 week where you're waiting on the results to come back and you don't know what's going to happen. Because we're so concerned and there's nothing we can do about it. And that's the second piece about worry. The things we worry about are the things that either we are unable to fix or unwilling to fix. Either we don't want to do the work or we're unable to do the work. The reason we worry about our health is because we can't control it. I mean, you can exercise and you can diet and you can do some things, but how many of you know somebody who was like in their 40s in good health and had a heart attack anyway? We all know that guy. How many of you've read the stories about the 18-year-old athlete who something tragic had, an aneurysm? Like, you can do some stuff, but at the end of the day, there's not much you can do. And so we worry about it because we can't control it. We worry about finances because I can't control what the hospital's going to charge me when I take the ambulance ride there. They're just going to send me a bill and I got to figure out how to pay it. I can't make people like me. I can't make people want to be around me. And so we worry about these things that we can't control. And here's why prayer is a solution to anxiety, because when we come before God with our petitions, what we're saying is, God, I can't fix this. I'm not big enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not strong enough. I can't fix this, but you can. And so I'm just going to trust in you. I'm going to trust that you are good enough to do what is best for me, that you are wise enough to know what is best for me, and that you are powerful enough to actually do those things. And so, God, I'm going to stop making it my responsibility to fix the global economy. I'm not going to worry about that anymore. I'm going to bring my request before you, and I'm going to let you handle that. I'm going to stop making it my responsibility to fix the family dynamics in our family. I'm going to do my job. I'm going to love people. I'm going to care about people. I'm going to forgive people. But I'm going to stop pretending like I have to fix everybody in my life. And I'm going to lay my requests before you, and I'm going to let you handle that because you can handle that better than me. And the reason we bring our petitions with thanksgiving is because thanksgiving reminds us of all the times God has answered our prayers in the past. Did you come across all those passages in the Old Testament where it calls God the God who brought them up out of Egypt, or the God who led them through the wilderness, or the God who brought them into the promised land? If you read the Old Testament, they recount the Exodus story on like every other page, especially in the Psalms where they're praying or in the prophets where they're praying. And the reason they do that is because if they're going to ask God for something new, they want to remember who God is and what he's already done for them. And so they say, you're the God who, when we were in slavery, rescued us and brought us into the promised land. I know you can meet this need now. And so the reason Paul says bring your petitions with thanksgiving is because we need thanksgiving to remember what God has already done for us. All the ways he's already provided for us. All the prayers he's already answered for us. All the ways he's already been good to us. So then we can go, God, I know you're good because this is how you've been good to me. And God, I know you can take care of this because here are all the ways you've taken care of me. And God, I know I can trust you because here's all the ways you've come through in the past. And so Paul says, instead of worry, instead of hanging out and going, man, how am I going to fix this? What am I going to do? When that emotion comes, we drop to our knees. We say, God, this is your problem. This is bigger than me. I can't handle this. And I trust in you, and I believe in you, and I believe in your goodness, and I am so thankful for who you are. So God, would you just take care of this in the way that you see best? And then it frees me up from anxiety. I'll illustrate it for you this way before we keep reading. As I have mentioned multiple times here, I have control problems, okay? I like to control things. And never does that come out more than the week of camp that I do. Okay, we run a week of camp, 7 days long, 120 some students, and I micromanage to the moment what's going to happen, who's going to do what, and what. And there's an anxiety that comes with that, right? The weeks leading up to that, there's like, oh my goodness, what if this falls apart? Well, do I have all the supplies I need for this? What if I forget? And so one of the things that I've been working on is what we call delegation. And so I will find someone that I can trust, not with the whole thing, but with a small piece of it. And so I'll use, for example, my friend Dan. You met him at Christmas Eve if you were here. He did all the voiceover stuff for like our Toy Box stories and all that stuff. And he's really good at like upfront goofy stuff. Getting kids to have fun, being a goofball on stage. He's an actor by trade. Falls off horses right now. He's at a Ren Fair playing a knight. He's really good at that. And so we'll have a night where I'll just say, Dan, here's what I want. Wednesday night, you've got an hour and a half. I need you to plan a game night for the kids. What do you want it to look like? I don't care. What do you want me to do? I don't care. I want them to have fun, and it needs to be an hour and a half long. And you got $100 budget. Do what you need. And what I love about that is I know Dan, and I trust Dan well enough that I know it's going to be good. And I don't have to worry about it. And I don't have to go to the store and buy supplies. And I don't have to check my schedule. And I now know there's an hour and a half on Wednesday night that I have to do nothing for because Dan's got it covered. And it's going to be good. And the reason I know it's going to be good is because I've seen Dan do it a dozen times before. And because I know I can trust him, now I don't have to worry about that anymore. What Paul is saying in Philippians 4 is, if you know that you can trust God, because you've seen him care for you before, you've seen him watch over you before, you've seen him be good to you before, then you don't have to worry about it anymore. God, I don't know how I'm going to make it through this week, but you do. I trust you. I'm going to leave it in your hands. And it's really hard to have trust in God and be anxious at the same time. And so Paul says, you want to make your life more joyful, make your life more peaceful, make your life more content. Don't worry about changing your circumstances. Just change where you've placed your trust. Stop trusting in yourself. Stop trusting in your own skills. And start trusting in him. And then he writes about this beautiful exchange that happens. That as we come to God and give him our anxiety and present our request with thanksgiving, he says that what we receive in return is in the peace of God, which surpasses every thought, or surpasses understanding in some of your translations, will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. That in return for your anxiety, you will receive a peace that surpasses your ability to understand, and that peace will guard your hearts and minds. Now, for the folks reading this originally, they would not have been able to hear that phrase, guarding your hearts and mind, without picturing Roman soldiers. Paul himself was likely chained to a Roman soldier. He was under house arrest in Rome, where the Praetorian Guard would have come in, and he would have been chained to a guard every single day, 4-hour shifts, awaiting his trial. Paul knew a thing or two about a guard. But the people of Philippi lived in a Roman province that was far from Rome, on the outskirts of the Roman Empire. And historically, they had at least one legion stationed there at all times. Meaning that when you lived in Philippi and you got up in the morning and you looked out on the wall, you saw Roman soldiers standing guard. And what was the purpose of those soldiers? To protect you from anyone who might want to oppose Rome. To guard you and keep you safe. And Paul is saying that this peace that God sends, it does that for your heart and mind. It protects you. What does it protect you from? Well, we've all lived the experience. We know that anxiousness and worry, they lead us into sin, right? They lead us into sin. It's really hard to be patient and kind with someone when you're anxious, isn't it? Did you ever snap at someone and it wasn't their fault, you were just worried about something else? It's really hard to be generous when you're worried about finances. Did you ever not give something to somebody because you were worried about paying a bill? It's really hard to be forgiving and kind when you're worried what people think about you all the time. And you're worried, well, maybe they don't really like me at all. It's really hard to live the life that Christ has called you to when you are consumed with worry, when you're consumed with being in control. And so Paul says, here's the formula. Don't worry. Come before God with petition and thanksgiving, and he'll give you this peace that will protect your heart and mind from all those fears and all those anxious thoughts and all those temptations that they lead to, so that you can actually be who God called you to be. You can live this life of joy and contentment, not through changing circumstances, but through changing perspective. Just a few verses later, he gives us kind of the summary of that. He says, I rejoiced in the Lord greatly that now at last you've renewed your care for me. Paul's in prison. The Philippian church has sent him some financial support, some food, some manuscripts. We don't know what, but they've sent him some kind of support. He says, I'm grateful for that. You were in fact concerned about me, but you lacked the opportunity to show it. And then he gets to the point. But I don't say this out of need, for I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I am. I know both how to have little and I know how to have a lot. In any and all circumstances, I have learned the secret of being content, whether well-fed or hungry, whether in abundance or in need. I am able to do all things through him who strengthens me. One of the most misquoted verses in all of Scripture, by the way. We write it on our shoes before we go play football, meaning I can win this baseball game or football game because Christ is with me. What's the guy on the other team who has more Christians? Never mind. It's always confused me. Or I can beat cancer because Christ. The verse in its original context means this. I can face any circumstances and be content in any circumstances. No matter what the doctor says, no matter what the bank statement says, no matter whether I have a lot of friends or I'm all alone, I can rejoice and be content and be at peace in all circumstances because Christ is with me. And in him, I can stand no matter the situation. That's what the verse means in its original context. That there is nothing this world can throw at me that will throw me off, that will disturb me, that will mess me up, that will make me anxious in a way that I can no longer be who Christ called me to be. I can do anything as a follower of Christ because he's with me. I can be content when I have a lot. I can be content when I have a little. I can live at peace when there are lots of people around. I can be at peace when there's nobody around. I can be at peace in health. I can rejoice in sickness. For I have Christ. And he is in charge, and he loves me, and he cares for me, and he holds me in the palm of his hand. So I don't need to be anxious about anything. I'm going to illustrate this with one last object lesson, and then we'll wrap up for the day. Anybody know what this thing here is called? It's a fancy little toy. Nobody? Oh, a selfie stick? It is kind of a selfie stick, but it's a special selfie stick. This is a motorized gimbal. Anybody know what a gimbal is? Yeah, not nearly enough techie people in our church. That's all right. Love you all anyway. It's not working properly at the moment. There we go. So a gimbal allows you to hold your phone. And you'll notice that even as I move the stick around, it keeps my phone nice and level. Keeps it from messing up. Keeps it from being bumpy and blurry. And the idea behind a gimbal is it allows you to videotape or take pictures while moving without causing a lot of background movement or things messing up. Normally, if you want to videotape something, you put it on a tripod or you put it on a monopod so it doesn't move. This allows you to like ride a four-wheeler and get a nice, steady, unbouncy picture, okay? Because it's going to hold the camera steady. Even if the stick moves up and down, the motors are going to keep the camera steady. Let me show you what that looks like real quick, and then we'll finish up here. This is kind of the difference between using a gimbal and not using a gimbal.
Okay, so here's what it looks like when you walk in by yourself.
Can you refire that so the picture will load? It's been feisty.
Even though I'm doing my best to hold it steady to make sure that everything is smooth. Okay, so here's what it looks like when you walk in by yourself and you're just holding your phone in your hand. And even though I'm doing my best to hold it steady to make sure that everything is smooth, as I walk, my shoulders naturally go up and down a little bit. It's going to get really bad when I go up these steps here. You can see that the circumstances around the phone are making the phone move. It might have even made you a little motion sick.
So here we go, making the same trip again, right down the middle of the worship center. And you'll immediately notice how much smoother the picture is. The reason? Put the phone in the gimbal. So no matter how much I bounce or shake or move up and down, even as I get ready to walk up the steps, you'll notice that it stays smooth. The circumstances are changing, but the camera stays steady.
And that's the purpose of a gimbal. It keeps my camera steady and smooth. No matter how much I shake or move or shift things around it, it's going to record a nice, steady, smooth video that I can actually show to people without making them motion sick. If I did this without this on here and then showed it to you, you would all be vomiting, okay? Head spinning. But the purpose of a gimbal is to allow the camera to stay steady and secure, even as the circumstances change. This is essentially what Paul writes about in Philippians chapter 4. That you live in a world where your circumstances are going to change daily, weekly, monthly. Someone that you thought was going to be there for you forever is all of a sudden going to not be there. Whether it's because they've passed away, whether because they've turned their back on you, but your heart's going to be broken by that. You're going to work jobs where you think, man, finances are great right now. Everything's going awesome, and I got this much in retirement, and then like 9 things are going to happen at once. The car's going to break down, and the hot water tank's going to go out, and there's going to be a medical bill, and all of a sudden you're going, I don't know how I'm going to pay for all this. You're going to be healthy your whole life, and then you're going to get that cancer diagnosis when you're 65 and go, oh my goodness, what do we do now? That's life. And if our joy and our peace is dependent upon our circumstances, then we'll never really have joy and peace. And what Paul is writing here is if we can learn to trust in God, to bring our requests and concerns before him, and to actually let him be in charge, what we get in exchange is a peace that passes understanding and the ability to rejoice in the Lord always. That it doesn't matter how much things shift, he holds us in the palm of his hand. steady and unchanging, unaffected by the things around us. For we are his, and he is good, and he is strong, and he is trustworthy. And so my encouragement to you today is that whatever it is that may be making you anxious, whatever it is that may be causing you concern, to present your request to the Lord through petition and thanksgiving, and see if you can't taste that peace that passes understanding. So we're going to do that right now. I'm going to give us about 60 seconds of just silent prayer time. And I don't know what it is that's making you anxious today. I don't know what's going on in your life right now that you're concerned about. I don't know what it is that you're dealing with that you go, man, I don't think I can handle this. But I just want to give you some time to come before the Lord in a quiet, silent moment and lay those requests before him. Then when we're done, I'll close us in prayer. And we'll sing as kind of a celebratory anthem together, "'Tis so sweet to trust in Jesus," for it certainly is. So why don't you take a moment of silent prayer, and then I'll close us in a moment.